I've never been the kind of person who thought my family would betray me. That kind of drama always felt like something you read about online, or maybe it happened to distant relatives who never got along. My parents raised me on the idea that family was everything, that you could always count on the people who shared your blood. I believed it like gospel. I'm in my early 30s now, single, no kids, not really flashy. I've always been quiet, maybe too trusting, maybe too reserved. But when my grandfather died, I learned how dangerous blind trust can be. My grandfather, for context, was a tough man. Not cruel, not unkind, but the sort who believed in hard work, long hours, and paying respect where it was due. He owned a small chain of auto repair shops around our county. Nothing glamorous, but steady. He built it from nothing. As a kid, I used to hang around his shop on Saturdays, sweeping floors or fetching coffee for the mechanics. He'd slip me a $5 bill and pat my shoulder like I'd just solved world hunger. He was that kind of man. I loved him. When he passed away, it hit me hard. Not just because of the grief, but because he was one of the few people in my family who actually saw me. My parents are respectable, you could say. They've always had this certain air about them, like they wanted more than what they had, and I never really fit their vision of success. My grandfather didn't care about that. With him, I could just be myself. Losing him felt like losing my anchor. The funeral was simple. Closed casket. Some of his old friends came, mostly people from the shops. I remember sitting there, numb, barely hearing the pastor. My parents looked tired but composed, and I thought, at least we have each other now. That was what I believed. That was the last time I felt safe in that belief. A couple of weeks later, I asked my mom if Grandpa had left any instructions, or a will, or something we needed to handle. She gave me this look, tired, dismissive. There wasn't much left, she said. He sold off the shops before he died. The money went to paying medical bills. There was no will. We're lucky he didn't leave us with debt. I nodded, because what else was I supposed to do? I wasn't entitled, I wasn't greedy. I believed her. Why would I think my own mother would lie to me about something like that? But I grieved not just his absence, but this idea that everything he had built was gone. I thought about all the Saturdays we'd spent together, about the times he told me, one day, you'll understand the value of building something that lasts. I thought maybe he meant legacy and spirit, not money. Maybe I had misunderstood. So I let it go. Months went by. Life went back to its quiet, steady rhythm. Work, home, maybe drinks with a couple of friends. I thought about Grandpa often, but always with that hollow ache that comes when you feel like an entire chapter of your life has been closed and sealed. My parents never brought him up much after that. Whenever I did, they shifted the topic, like they were already tired of carrying his memory. I didn't push. It would have ended there, honestly. I would have carried on believing that the shops were gone, that the will never existed, that the legacy of his work died with him. I would have mourned and moved forward. But fate has a way of cutting through silence. Almost a year later, I ran into an old acquaintance at a coffee shop downtown. His name's Aaron, a guy I vaguely knew back in high school. We weren't close, but he recognized me, and we got to talking. He's a lawyer now, working mostly in estate law. I don't even remember how it came up, but when I mentioned losing my grandfather, Aaron tilted his head. I think I remember his name, he said. Didn't I handle some paperwork for his estate? Yeah, grandfather's name, right? My stomach tightened, but I didn't want to seem weird, so I nodded. Aaron smiled politely, sipping his coffee. Yeah, I remember. Solid guy. Left a straightforward will. Not a lot of drama, which is rare in my line of work. Mostly just the business assets, some personal things. You must have gotten that sorted out already, huh? I froze. Literally froze. What do you mean? I asked. He looked at me, confused. The will. He left you a share of the business, didn't he? Or, wait, am I mixing you up with someone else? My heart started pounding. My throat went dry. No, I said carefully. I was told there wasn't a will. That everything was sold off. Aaron frowned. That's strange. No, I remember. There was definitely a will. I drafted part of it. Your grandfather specifically mentioned you. He wanted you to inherit a portion of the shop shares. I don't know the details of what happened afterward, but yeah, there was a will. I don't remember much after that. I nodded, smiled, made some excuse about needing to run. But my brain was on fire. My hands shook as I walked back to my car. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the steering wheel. There was a will. There was a will, and it had my name in it. And my parents told me there wasn't. That night, Lying in bed, I replayed every word my mom had said. The way she dismissed me. The way she claimed it was all gone. I thought about my dad, silent as always, nodding along. And then I thought about my grandfather, about his rough hand on my shoulder, about the way he said, "One day, you'll understand the value of building something that lasts." I didn't sleep, because for the first time in my life, I realized my parents might have lied to me. And not about something small, about this. And the thing is, once that thought enters your head, you can't make it leave. After I ran into Aaron, I did what I always do when something rattles me. I tried to out-silence it. I went home, washed the coffee smell off my hands like that would rinse the conversation out of my head, and told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe he had the wrong person. Maybe Grandpa changed his mind at the end. Maybe I misheard. I repeated, maybe, like a prayer until the house went still and my phone screen lit up the dark. I opened my laptop. It started with a dumb impulse. I typed my grandfather's name into the state business registry. I told myself it would show me a big red, inactive stamp, and I'd close the tab and stop spinning out. Instead, I found a new entity, a quietly named LLC that had absorbed the DBA of the repair shops. It had been filed 2 weeks after he went into hospice. 2 weeks. Member managed. 2 members listed by name, my mother and my father. I stared until the lines blurred. Then I scrolled, hands sweating on the trackpad. There were assignment documents too. Asset transfers from the old S-Corp to the new LLC. It was all neat and clean. Dated. Stamped. Filed. Like someone had been waiting. You know that feeling when your stomach drops and you want to throw up, but your body won't give you the relief? That's what hit me. I clicked through each PDF. There it was, over and over. Their names. Not mine. Nowhere mine. I texted Aaron at 1:12 a.m., then immediately felt stupid. Hey. I wrote. Hypothetical question. If it will leave shares of a business to a grandchild, can the executor transfer assets somewhere else first? He didn't reply, because normal people sleep. I lay on the couch and watched the ceiling breathe and tried to make my heartbeat stop screaming. Somewhere around 4, I found an old voicemail from my grandfather I hadn't let myself listen to. I hit play. "Kiddo," he said, voice rough with age and cigarettes he never admitted to. "Don't forget the little key in the bottom drawer of my desk. You'll know what it's for." I didn't remember ever finding a key. At 9, Aaron texted back. "Cannot give advice on a specific case, obviously. Hypothetical. An executor has a duty to follow the will. If they don't, beneficiaries can object, but there are strict deadlines. In some states, months. Also, executors can sometimes liquidate or restructure if the will gives them broad powers. Paper trail matters. Why?" I stared at deadlines until it felt like it burned my corneas. Then I typed. "Just found out my grandpa might have left me something, and there's weird stuff. I'll handle it. Thanks." "Get your own counsel," he sent back. "And pull the probate file at the courthouse." I took the rest of the day off work. I told my boss I had a family thing. Technically not a lie. The clerk at the county probate office was a woman my age with chipped blue nail polish and a saint's patience. I gave her my grandfather's full name and death date. She typed. The kind light on her face shifted. "There is a file," she said, eyes flicking to me. "It's sealed to non-parties." I laughed because I didn't have another reaction available. "Sealed? Why?" She lowered her voice, like we were sharing a secret. "It happens sometimes if there are sensitive financials or medical stuff, or if a motion was filed and the judge granted it. I can give you the docket sheet. It's public." It was a single page. The words might as well have been in another language. Petition for probate. Letters testamentary granted. Final accounting approved. Distribution complete. Dates that marked out a little dance. Filed, heard, granted, closed. The executor listed, my father. The attorney of record, not Aaron. Someone from a firm I recognized as expensive. Distribution complete, I read. "So it's done." "I'm sorry," she said, and she sounded like she meant it. I sat on a bench in the hallway with that paper on my knees, my hands shaking so badly the words shivered. My dad had been the executor. He had the keys to the house and the keys to the paperwork and, apparently, to the narrative. And whatever Grandpa had decided for me died in that file I wasn't allowed to see. On the way out, I called my mother. My voice did that light, friendly thing it does when I want people to underestimate me. "Hey, Mom. Quick question. Did Grandpa have a will?" Silence. Then, with that same tired, dismissive tone she'd used the first time. No, honey. We told you. There wasn't anything formal. It was all a mess. I closed my eyes. Weird, because the probate court says Dad was executor of a will. She exhaled through her nose. It was very simple. There were medical bills. Your grandfather changed things around at the end. Look, this is a lot of legal stuff you don't need to worry about. The LLC, I said, voice flat. The one you and Dad filed. The shop assets went there. Where are you getting this? Her voice pitched higher, like a kettle beginning to scream. Public records. Don't make a scene, she snapped softly. You don't understand the complexities of running a business. Your grandfather didn't want you burdened by it. Mom, I said, and something in my voice must have landed because she stopped. Did Grandpa leave me part of the business? A beat too long. He talked about it, she said finally. But in the end he realized it would be better to consolidate. For family harmony. For family harmony, I echoed, and my hands went cold. Okay. Don't be dramatic, she added. We did what needed to be done. I hung up before the anger pushed me into saying something I couldn't take back. I went to my car and put my head against the steering wheel and listened to the blood pound my ears. Family harmony. I could hear my grandfather's laugh through it, rough and warm and disbelieving. I drove to the oldest of the shops, the one with the chipped blue awning I'd helped repaint as a teenager. The sign had been updated, the font cleaner, the logo modern. The smell was the same, hot rubber, oil, dust. Rudy, who had been there since I was 10, looked up from a truck and grinned. Look what the cat dragged in, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Haven't seen you since the funeral. You doing okay? I'm trying, I said, and I meant it. How's business? Good. Your folks came in and shook things up. Got new software. Hired a bookkeeper. They said you were too busy to be involved. Which, no hard feelings, kid. Everybody's got their path. Heat crawled up my neck. They said that. He shrugged. They said you told them you didn't want anything to do with the shops. That you'd thanked your granddad and were moving on. I told them that didn't sound like you. But, hey, I don't get paid to referee. I smiled so tightly my molars hurt. Right. He glanced at me, eyes softening. For what it's worth, the big man always said you had a good head. He kept that red toolbox locked up with your name on it for months. Thought you'd ask about it. My voice stuck. Where is it? In the office, he said, and gestured. Unless they moved it. They had. The office looked like my mother. Clean, minimalist, filtered. A gleaming monitor. A little succulent that would die in 2 weeks. No red toolbox. I checked drawers, because pride is a luxury you lose when the ground falls out. In the bottom drawer of the old desk, there was an imprint in the dust where a small key once lay. Lose something? Asked a voice behind me. I turned. It was the bookkeeper, a woman I didn't know. She wore a polite smile. Just remembering, I said. I went home with the paper from the courthouse and the PDFs printed and hole-punched in a binder like I could put a leash on this. I texted Aaron again, because I needed someone to tell me I wasn't insane. Hypothetical number 2. If the probate file is sealed and distribution is marked complete from a year ago, am I screwed? He called instead of texting. I can't talk about your case, but generally. If you were a beneficiary and weren't given notice, that's a problem. If you got notice and didn't object in time, the clock may have run. Sealing complicates things. You need an attorney to petition the court to unseal or to get copies as an interested party. What if the executor was my dad? Then it's even messier, he said gently. I'm sorry. I made an appointment with a probate attorney the next day and took my little binder and my hopeful, angry heart. She had steel gray hair and a kind face. She listened without interrupting, then asked, Did you receive any official notices? Certified mail? Emails? Anything? No, I said, and the word felt like the first honest one I'd spoken out loud. She steepled her fingers. If there was a will that named you, and you received no notice, that's concerning. But the court record shows the final accounting was approved a year ago. In our state, motions to set aside are rare and require evidence of fraud and a compelling reason for missing deadlines. The file is sealed, so I can't see what was submitted without permission. We can try to petition, but I want you to prepare yourself for the likelihood that the court will decline. So that's it. My voice cracked. They just take it, and I'm supposed to swallow it? She met my eyes. Justice and the law aren't always the same thing. I thanked her. I paid for the consultation with hands that didn't feel like mine. Outside, the air was too bright and too sharp, like someone had polished the day with sandpaper. I walked until my legs ached, trying to outrun the way it all snapped into place. The LLC, the sealed file, the narrative about medical bills, the red toolbox, the empty key drawer. How many choices had to align to erase me so neatly? That night, I called my father. He answered on the third ring. "Hey, son," he said, like this was any other evening. "I went to the courthouse," I said. "I saw the docket." He was quiet for a long moment. "This was complicated." "What was complicated about Grandpa's will naming me?" "You weren't ready," he said, the words slow and careful. "You've always been a quiet boy. You don't like conflict. Running a business means making hard decisions. Your mother and someone had to keep the lights on. So you kept them on by cutting me out?" "Watch your tone," he said. "We did what your grandfather would have wanted." "No," I said. "You did what made your lives easier." He sighed. "Sometimes parents make choices their children can't understand." "We're the same age you were when you had me," I said. "I can understand choices. I can also understand lies." He didn't respond. I heard the clink of ice in a glass. Finally, "If you keep pressing this, you'll tear the family apart." There it was. The threat dressed up as concern. "I didn't tear it," I said softly. "I just found the seam." After we hung up, I sat on my floor with my binder open and all the printouts spread like a crime drama. Dates, names, stamps, a timeline that looked like a well-rehearsed choreography. Hospice admission, LLC formation, executor appointment, asset transfer, final accounting. A neat black line where I should have been, and instead, a blank. I thought about my grandfather's hand on my shoulder, the heat of the shop in July, the way he winked when I got the oil filter off without stripping it. One day, you'll understand the value of building something that lasts. Maybe he meant me. Maybe this something was the truth, not the shops. Maybe I was reaching for comfort because I had none. I didn't sleep again. But somewhere around dawn, after the anger dimmed to a low, steady coals in the chest burn, I realized something that made my breathing even out. I was done asking them to tell me what happened. I would stop giving them the power to decide the story. If all I could get was the truth, I would take it. And if the truth set anything on fire, well, so be it. When you learn your parents lied to you, lied so cleanly, you almost believed it was reality, you don't rage right away. Not if you're me. Not if you've built your whole life on the assumption that their word was bedrock. It starts as confusion, then grief. Then this slow, steady burn in your chest that doesn't flare up so much as it simmers, day after day, until everything you look at is tinted by the heat. That's what it became for me, a quiet burn. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not friends, not coworkers. I kept going into the office, answering emails, sitting in meetings, smiling at bad jokes. But every time my phone buzzed with a family group chat message, my mom posting a photo of her garden, my dad forwarding some chain about politics, I felt my throat close. I started leaving them on read. They noticed, I'm sure, but they didn't say anything. That's their specialty, silence unless it suits them. At night, I started sorting through everything I had of my grandfather's. Old photos, little gifts he'd given me, receipts from the shop when I was a teenager. I went through them like a detective, like maybe there'd be a hidden map folded into a birthday card. What I found instead was a pattern. The way he always signed his notes, "Proud of you." He said it so often I stopped registering it as unusual. But sitting there at my kitchen table, all the notes spread out, I realized. He said it because he wanted me to believe it, even if no one else did. And then came the toolbox. I couldn't get Rudy's words out of my head. He kept that red toolbox locked up with your name on it. I drove back to the shop a week later, telling myself it was just to see him again, but I knew what I was looking for. Rudy greeted me like no time had passed, but when I asked about the toolbox, he hesitated. "They took it," he said finally, rubbing the back of his neck. "When your folks came in and cleaned up the office. I asked if I could keep it here for you, but your dad said it was going to storage. Said you didn't want reminders cluttering things up." Cluttering. That word almost broke me. I pressed him, asked if he knew where storage was. He didn't. "Look, kid, don't make trouble for yourself. They run things now. It's not worth it." Maybe he was right, but the burn in me said otherwise. That night, I went digging again, not through Grandpa's things, but through the county's online archives. I wanted to see just how clean their erasure had been. It was all there, digital and smug. Asset transfers, meeting minutes, every piece of bureaucracy written in language designed to sound boring enough to lull people into not noticing what it meant. It meant they took what wasn't theirs. And then, almost by accident, I found something that made my pulse jump. One of the PDFs, the operating agreement for the new LLC, had an attached exhibit listing former shareholder interests. My name wasn't there, of course, but my grandfather's original shares were. The agreement literally acknowledged they existed before being consolidated. I stared at that line until my eyes hurt. That was my proof. It wasn't a smoking gun for court. My attorney had already warned me the clock had run out, but it was a record. It was the truth. And once I had it, I started to think differently. Not, how do I get it back? But, how do I make sure it isn't buried? The problem was, I still hesitated. I'd sit there with my binder, staring at the documents, imagining sending them to every relative, every friend, posting them online. Then I'd freeze. Because what if no one cared? What if they just saw it as family drama, or worse, thought I was bitter and making things up? But then the anniversary of Grandpa's death started creeping closer on the calendar. A year since the funeral. A year since I sat in that pew believing my family had my back. A year since I trusted my parents without question. I knew what I wanted, to tell the truth on that day. To reclaim it. Not for money, not for revenge in the Hollywood sense, but because I couldn't stand the idea of his story ending with silence. So I started planning. I went through the family group chat and downloaded every photo, every message where my parents posed in front of the shops like they were self-made entrepreneurs. I lined those up against the LLC filings, the probate docket, the timeline I'd created. I drafted what I wanted to say, rewriting it over and over until the words felt sharp enough to cut, but calm enough not to be dismissed as hysteria. The tone was important. I didn't want to scream. I wanted to sound like the man my grandfather believed I could be, measured, steady, unwilling to let the truth rot in silence. At the same time, I started noticing things I hadn't before. My parents calling me less, but still posting pictures of family dinners with my sister's kids without inviting me. An uncle mentioning, offhand, how generous my parents were to take on the burden of the shops. My mother telling a cousin at a barbecue that I was better off focusing on my own career, away from the stress of small business. They were rewriting me in real time, painting me as someone who chose distance, someone who opted out. That was the moment I stopped hesitating. If I stayed silent, that version of me would calcify in everyone's mind. My parents would get away not just with theft, but with stealing my narrative. And I couldn't forgive that. So, I bought a scanner. I digitized everything, every document, every receipt, every piece of paper with a date and a name. I put it all in a cloud folder, labeled and color-coded. I practiced explaining the timeline out loud, recording myself and listening back, making sure it sounded clear. Because I knew once I pressed send, there'd be no going back. And through it all, I felt that burn settle into something else. Not rage, not grief, something colder, steadier. A kind of quiet strength. I wasn't going to shout them down. I was going to outlast them. I think that's when I finally started to understand what Grandpa meant by building something that lasts. It wasn't the shops. It wasn't the money. It was the truth. And I was ready to build it brick by brick. Even if the first wall I built was the one that would stand between me and my parents forever. The day crept up on me like it was stalking. A full year since we put my grandfather in the ground. I could feel it in my body before I saw it on the calendar, like my chest was tuned to some frequency only grief transmits on. Every time I passed the mirror, I saw him in flashes, the slope of his shoulders in mine, the crease at the corner of his eyes when he laughed. I hadn't been back to the cemetery since the funeral. My parents organized a family remembrance for the anniversary, a casual gathering with flowers and catered food at their house, not the gravesite. I got the text in the group chat. Sunday, 2 p.m. We'll all share stories. Casual. Bring dessert if you want. I stared at it for a long time. I knew then what I would do. I wasn't going to shout at them in person. I wasn't going to show up and start waving papers like a madman while my cousins tried to corral their kids. No. That would have played right into the image they'd painted of me. Bitter, unstable, dramatic. I wanted precision. I wanted them to look me in the eye one moment, smiling with their plates of catered chicken, and then feel the floor crack under their feet the next. so I made sure everything was ready. I'd spent weeks scanning and labeling. The LLC filings, the probate docket, the signatures, the transfer dates. I paired them with old photos. Me and Grandpa at the shop when I was 12, me holding a wrench twice my size, him grinning behind me. And next to them, I wrote captions in calm, measured words. My grandfather built these shops from nothing. He left me a share in his will. A year ago, my parents told me there was no will, no assets, nothing left. That was not true. Public records show they transferred the business into their names while he was in hospice. They sealed the probate file. By the time I learned, it was too late legally. But I refused to let silence rewrite the truth. I rehearsed those captions until I could hear my own voice in them. Steady, not begging, not raging. Just a statement. On the morning of the anniversary, I drove to the cemetery first. I brought one thing with me, a wrench from my own small toolbox. I laid it against his headstone because I never did find that red toolbox with my name on it. My throat locked up, but I said it anyway. They didn't win, Grandpa. I won't let them. Then I went home and waited for 2 p.m. The family group chat pinged alive with photos. My sister's kids holding cupcakes, my aunt smiling with a plate of food, my dad standing by the grill like nothing was wrong. I watched the little typing bubble appear and disappear as they shared small talk. That's when I dropped it. Not a scream, not a rant, just a link. For anyone who wants to know the truth about what happened to Grandpa's legacy. The link led to a Google Drive folder. Inside, every document, every caption, every photo of me and him in the shops. My comm statement at the top. And then I put my phone on silent. It took 12 minutes. At 2:12, my sister called. I let it go to voicemail. At 2:14, my mother texted in all caps, "Delete that right now. You are humiliating us." My dad followed with, "We need to talk. Privately. Not like this." An uncle messaged, "What's going on? Is this true?" Another relative, "Why didn't anyone tell us about this?" And then, the silence broke open. Screenshots spread through the extended family group. Cousins I hadn't heard from in years messaged me privately. I always wondered what happened to the shops. "Damn, man, I'm sorry. I believe you." But the best was Rudy. He posted a picture of me at the shop when I was 13, greasy up to my elbows, holding a part like I'd won the lottery. He captioned it, "This kid worked harder than anyone. His granddad loved him. He deserved better than lies." I didn't respond to anyone. I didn't need to. Because for once, I wasn't trying to defend myself. I was just putting the truth where no one could bury it again. Later that night, after the group chat had devolved into infighting, my mom lashing out, an aunt demanding answers, cousins picking sides, I finally picked up one call. It was my sister. Her voice was quiet, almost shaking. "Why now?" she asked. "Because today's the day he died," I said. "And I'm done letting them erase me." She didn't argue. She didn't defend them. She just whispered, "I had no idea." "I know," I said. And I did know. Because that was the other betrayal. They'd lied to her too. To everyone. By midnight, my parents had stopped texting me. Instead, my mom posted in the family chat, "We will not be discussing this further. This matter is closed." But the thing about truth is, once it's spoken, you can't reseal it like a court file. People had seen. People knew. And for the first time in a year, I slept. Not peacefully, not dreamlessly, but I slept. Because I'd finally taken back what was mine. Not the shops, not the money, but the story. And that, more than anything, felt like freedom. When I woke up the next morning, it was like stepping into the aftermath of a storm. The air felt different. My phone lit up with dozens of unread messages, missed calls, voicemails. I didn't listen to most of them. I didn't need to. The subject lines in my email told me everything. "You've made a mistake. We need to talk. Why would you do this?" My parents hadn't called directly. Not once. That absence said more than any voicemail could. Instead, I heard from everyone else. My cousin Emily, the one who lives 3 states away, messaged me. I knew something was off. They always talked about the shops like they'd just inherited them naturally, but Grandpa was never that kind of man. "Thank you for telling the truth." My uncle, on my dad's side, texted, "You embarrassed your father. You could have handled this quietly. Family doesn't air laundry like this." And Rudy, the one voice that didn't make me feel crazy, left a voicemail. "Kid, I saw what you posted. You did right by him. Don't let anyone tell you different. Your granddad would have been proud." I saved that one. Played it twice. At work, I kept my head down. Nobody there knew anything. It wasn't their world. But even sitting at my desk, drafting reports, I felt like I was glowing with some private, terrible electricity. I'd broken something that couldn't be fixed. By midweek, the family group chat was a battlefield. Half the cousins demanding explanations, half going silent. My mother typing long, furious paragraphs about respect and family unity. My father posting once, just once. It's easy to twist documents out of context. Don't believe everything you see online. That one stung, even though I expected it. My own dad, trying to frame me as a liar in front of everyone else. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel the need to argue anymore. I didn't reply at all, because I had already laid out the proof. They could spin, they could sneer, they could gaslight, but the paper trail didn't care about their story. Still, it wasn't clean. Nothing about it was. My sister called again later that week. This time she didn't sound shocked. She sounded tired. You know they're furious, right? I figured. They said you're tearing the family apart. I laughed, sharp and humorless. Funny. That's the exact phrase Dad used when I asked him the truth. She sighed. I don't know what to do. I believe you, but I can't just cut them off. My kids need their grandparents. And her voice cracked. I don't want to lose you too. You won't, I said. This isn't about you. But in truth, I knew she would lose something. We all would. That was the cost. The fracture wasn't just between me and my parents. It was running through the entire family, splitting people into those who looked at the documents and nodded, and those who looked away because it was easier. And that's when it hit me. Exposure was only step one. The real fallout wasn't just the silence breaking. It was learning who could live with the truth and who couldn't. By the second week, my parents finally broke their silence. Not to me directly. No, they went to the extended family. A long email landed in everyone's inbox. The subject line, setting the record straight. I read it twice. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. They admitted nothing, but cloaked themselves in words like sacrifice and difficult decisions. They said Grandpa hadn't wanted me burdened. They said they had stepped up selflessly to protect the family as a whole. And between the lines, they painted me as ungrateful. I sat there in my apartment, staring at the email on my screen, my hands curled into fists. They hadn't denied the documents. They hadn't even addressed them. They'd just wrapped themselves in a new narrative. Parents doing their duty against a bitter son who didn't understand. I almost drafted a reply. I almost went line by line, tearing their words apart. But then I remembered something my attorney had said when I first went digging. Justice and the law aren't always the same thing. Maybe the same was true for truth and belief. I put the facts out there. Whether people chose to believe them wasn't my job anymore. And yet it hurt. God, it hurt. At night, the quiet burned. I'd lie awake thinking about the red toolbox that was supposed to be mine, about the key in the drawer my grandfather told me not to forget, about the way my dad's voice hardened when he said, "Watch your tone." I'd replay conversations, dissect every word, as if somewhere in there I'd find a crack that made all of this less deliberate, less cruel. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the shops. It was about control. About erasing me from the story so completely that I'd never think to question it. And maybe that's why exposing them felt so much like setting myself free. I wasn't free of the pain. I wasn't free of the fracture. But I was free of the silence. And in some twisted way, that was worth more than the inheritance could have been. Because silence was their weapon. And I'd taken it from them. After the dust of exposure settled, the silence came back. But this time it wasn't mine. For weeks after I dropped the documents, my phone buzzed constantly. Calls, texts, arguments, guilt trips. Then, little by little, it slowed. Cousins stopped asking questions. Aunts stopped demanding explanations. Even my sister called less, torn between me and them. Eventually, the buzzing stopped altogether. My phone went quiet, and I was left sitting in the wreckage. That was the cost no one warns you about. Not the explosion, but the crater afterward. I'd thought speaking the truth would feel like breathing again. And in a way, it did, at first. But the loneliness that followed was something else entirely. Family gatherings went on without me. Photos popped up on social media of birthday cakes, kids in Halloween costumes, Christmas trees with everyone smiling around them. Everyone except me. I'd scroll through those pictures late at night, staring at the empty spot where I should have been, and I'd wonder if maybe this was exactly what my parents wanted. to make me the outsider so thoroughly that even the truth couldn't bring me back in. And yet, even in the emptiness, there was a strange clarity. I stopped trying to convince anyone. I stopped sending long messages defending myself. Instead, I went walking, miles at a time, through my neighborhood, through the back roads near the cemetery, past the shops that should have been partly mine. I walked until my legs ached and my chest felt lighter, because at least movement meant I wasn't trapped in their story anymore. Sometimes I'd pass one of the shops, see the new logo gleaming on the sign, my parents' SUV parked out front. I never went in. Not again. But I'd stand across the street, hands shoved in my pockets, and remember the way the place used to smell: oil, dust, heat, and the way my grandfather's voice filled it. Those memories weren't theirs to take, no matter how many LLC filings they signed. I thought a lot about the red toolbox, about the little key in the drawer he told me not to forget. I'd never found it, but the absence of it haunted me. It felt symbolic, like he'd left me something I was never allowed to claim. At first that thought wrecked me, but the longer I sat with it, the more I realized, maybe what he left me wasn't an object. Maybe it was the insistence that I look, that I ask, that I not accept silence as an answer. And that shift, it started to change me. I began journaling. Not dramatic, just pages of thoughts I'd never said aloud. The anger, the grief, the moments of memory that made me feel human again. I wrote about the time he took me fishing, and we came back empty-handed, but laughing so hard my stomach hurt. I wrote about the first time he let me change a tire on my own, how proud he looked when I got it right. I wrote about the silence my parents wrapped me in and how I was done carrying it. I didn't share those words with anyone. They were mine. For once, something that didn't need their approval or their permission. People sometimes ask me if I regretted posting everything, breaking the silence. If it was worth losing the family I had left. The truth is complicated. Some days, yes, I regret it. Some days I wish I'd stayed quiet, swallowed the betrayal, kept my place at the table. Because loneliness can feel heavier than lies. But then I remember Rudy's voicemail. I play it on bad nights. Kid, you did right by him. Don't let anyone tell you different. I hear his voice, and behind it, I imagine my grandfather's laugh, rough and steady. And I know I couldn't have lived the rest of my life pretending I didn't know. The law hadn't given me justice. My parents hadn't given me honesty. The family hadn't given me support. All I had left was truth. And the more I carried it, the less it felt like a burden. The more it felt like freedom. By spring, something inside me shifted again. I realized I didn't have to define myself by what was stolen. I didn't have to keep orbiting their betrayal. I could build something new. I started small. I signed up for night classes in automotive repair, something I'd loved as a kid but never pursued because I was told it wasn't a real future. I joined a community garage where people came to fix their own cars and swap knowledge. I showed up nervous, quiet, still carrying the weight of the past. But the first time I slipped under a car and tightened a loose belt while someone watched in awe, I felt like a piece of myself had clicked back into place. It wasn't inheritance. It wasn't money. It was mine. The burn inside me finally started to cool, not gone, but tempered. And with it came a kind of quiet strength I hadn't known I could have. I couldn't rebuild my family, but I could rebuild myself. And maybe that was the inheritance my grandfather meant for me all along. Not the shops, not the toolbox, but the insistence that I never stop building. The first anniversary of my grandfather's death passed like a wound reopening. The second one came quieter. By then, the fallout had mostly settled into a kind of Cold War. My parents and I didn't speak. My sister and I exchanged texts on birthdays and holidays, careful not to cross into dangerous subjects. The family group chat went on without me. And yet, I was breathing easier. The more time passed, the less the silence felt like exile, and the more it felt like space. Empty at first, then wide, then freeing. I stopped checking social media for family photos. I stopped waiting for an apology that was never coming. And I started noticing things I'd missed. The peace of cooking for myself on a Sunday, the quiet pride of changing my own oil in the community garage, the calm of nights where I didn't carry their weight anymore. For months, though, I still kept the binder. The stack of documents, the color-coded proof, the evidence of betrayal. I'd flip through it on bad days, tracing the signatures, reminding myself I hadn't imagined it. That I wasn't crazy. That I'd been cut out. It was both anchor and knife. Until one evening, I realized I hadn't opened it in weeks. It sat on my bookshelf, gathering dust, while my life kept moving forward without it. So I took it down, slid the pages out, and burned them. Not in anger, just in release. I fed each sheet to a small fire in a metal bucket on my balcony. The flames curled the edges, blackened the words, turned signatures into smoke. The night air smelled sharp with paper and ink. I thought it would hurt, but instead it felt like loosening a knot that had lived in my chest for years. The truth had already been told. I didn't need the papers to prove it anymore. Afterward, I sat watching the ashes until the fire went out. And for the first time since Aaron told me, in that casual conversation at a coffee shop, that there was a will, I felt light. Not happy, not whole, but free. That night, I dreamed of the red toolbox again. In the dream, I finally opened it. And inside wasn't money or keys or deeds. It was just a note, written in my grandfather's rough scrawl, "Proud of you." I woke up crying, but it wasn't bitter anymore. I'll never get the shops back. I'll never get the inheritance that was meant for me. My parents will never admit what they did. They'll keep smiling in photos, keep telling their version of the story, keep pretending the fracture doesn't exist. But that's not my story anymore. My story is this. I took the silence they tried to bury me under and broke it. I carried the truth when no one else would. I let it scorch me until it burned down everything I thought I knew. And then I stepped out of the ashes lighter than I'd been before. Sometimes justice doesn't come in courtrooms or bank accounts. Sometimes it comes in the simple act of refusing to stay quiet. I don't have the shops. I don't have the toolbox. But I have the truth. And that's enough.